How we're doing today, if everyone is alive. All right. Hello, Gabriel. How are you doing today? Christina from Venice. How are you? Free Candy, all the way from Austin. You seem to have had a crazy weekend in Austin, Free Candy. I had watched that. I hope you're doing well and the city has calmed down. I don't like this anymore than you do. Well, thank you, Gabriel. I appreciate you listening. All right. So, guys, I have a lot going on today. If you are watching in YouTube or Periscope land, shoot me a message. Let me know that you can hear this show all right. That's how I know that you guys are watching it, because I'm restreaming it and I can't see the actual Periscope or YouTube feed. So if you are watching from Periscope, please give me a like and a share. If you're watching on YouTube, smash that like button, give me a share, subscribe to our channel. I try to reply, talk to all of you. I am quite busy. Egan in Florida, how are you doing? But it is difficult. It is Bowser. How are you doing, buddy? How is San Diego? I hope you are well down there. So yeah, it is. I'm trying to maintain, guys. I'm trying to maintain, but it is having you guys here every Monday and every weekday with me gives me an opportunity to deal with my own insanity, and perhaps it'll alleviate you of your own insanity, and together we will rid ourselves of our insanity and place it with the utmost sanity. Clear thinking, crystal clear, critical thinking that allows us to be at our best and help out those around us and make the world a better place. That's what we are all doing here. And certainly that gives me a reason to wake up on Monday morning excited to talk to you guys. All right. So, a couple things today. It is Monday, so that means there was a podcast drop this week. It is with Alexandra Jamieson and Bob Gower, the book Radical Alignment, which is a conflict resolution book. They have wrote a few other ones. I'm not quite sure. Estefan, how are you doing? Oh, Miss Knight said that she loved this episode. Hippie of the Hills, how you doing? Good to have you here, joining us from India. I enjoyed the book. One of the most difficult things is dealing with conflict in your life, whether it's work, family, friends, your significant other, because let's face it, most of the important decisions in your life come down to the conversations that you're having with your friends and your family and coworkers. And if you're unskilled, if you have trouble navigating those conversations, then you're having those conversations passively. If you're having those conversations passively, then you're about to accept the consequences. You're about to accept somebody else's agenda, somebody else's wants, needs, and desires. Because if they're putting up that conversation, there's something that they want out of it. If you are unwilling to engage in conversation, only to have those conversations passively, then you're going to be left dealing with the world as it's presented to you rather than you forging your own. And if you have these skills, then through conversation, stating your positions, compromising, you can come to an agreement or a path out of these conversations towards a much more desired outcome. So here's the thing about this and why I bring this up. before I got into self-development, I didn't realize how much of my life that I was living at the time was a direct result of the skills that I had or lacked, but also my willingness to engage in life, my willingness to engage in conversations for myself. Once I realized that the life that I was living was a direct result of those skills or lack thereof, and my willingness to engage, once I realized that and starting putting in effort, the conversations, life was starting to mold itself towards a better life that I desired, that I created. I started putting that together. I was now beginning to chip away at the stone of life to create it in an image that was much more suitable for me. And if it's much more suitable for me, then it's going to make me happy and then therefore impact the lives of those around me and make their lives better. However, if you lack the skills or you're uninterested in developing them and go into the world thinking that most people are nice and that they are going to accommodate you, well, I got news for you. Regardless of who these people are and their relationship towards you and how much they love you and think of you, it's always going to come down to how they feel first and foremost. That's just nature. It's natural. It doesn't make them narcissistic. It doesn't make them evil. It doesn't make them selfish. It makes them human. Now, can they override those feelings to accommodate you? Well, of course. But why would most people do that? They're not going to. So, yes, most people are just going to take care of themselves first and then start to look around about how they can start accommodating others. So, Bob and Alexandra's book, Radical Alignment, gives you great tips for some game-changing conversations, and their method in which they use and they promote in this book is called AIM, the all-in method. And I enjoyed it. I think there's some great points here and definitely things that you should be thinking about when you're engaging in these conversations in which your life and well-being can be better if you actually engaged. So there's a couple points that I wanted to bring up. And number one is, let's clarify the topic in which we're discussing. Both parties should know what is the topic before going into the conversation so that both are clear in what you're discussing. Number two, the intentions for having this discussion. Why are you having it? What are your intentions? What would you like to get out of this? Are you looking for alignment? Are you looking to see where your values align? Is there an agenda that you're looking to accomplish? You know, this is the problem that I have with the media. Number one, they do a terrible job in clarifying the topic. They'll tell you it's one thing, and then it's a bait and switch. They tell you it's about coronavirus, but yet it's about how the United States government has failed in its handling the situation, or it is about a whatever it is. They're going to set it up and then try to argue another topic. I hate that. So clarifying the topic. Hey, animal, I would like to have a conversation with you later, and it involves X, Y, and Z. Are you interested? This way, animal knows what we're going to be discussing, and then he can have his points put together. Spark a Sass, how you doing? Appy and KC, well, greetings from KC and greetings to you. As long as both parties know what you're going to be discussing, you can prepare mentally, emotionally, and physically for the conversation. And not physically to go in and start scrapping, physically to calm yourself down. Do what you need to do to feel good about having this conversation, especially if you're the one who's who's going to be directly affected by the conversation. Don't you hate when you're in the middle of a conversation or argument, a difficult conversation with somebody, realizing that it's directly going to affect you, yet you had no opportunity to prepare? How fair is that? So, intentions, what is it going to be about? That way, both parties know what you're going to be talking about. Now, number 2, concerns. Here is the topic. Here is my intentions. And here is what I'm concerned about in having this conversation. So now you have guidelines of some boundaries of here's the concerns that I'm having. So we both now can put together our positions and our arguments that involve these concerns. Incredibly important. Boundaries. Here are the boundaries for the conversation and my own personal boundaries that may or may not be affected by the conversation at hand. Extremely important. Most of the reason that people build contempt for each other, whether it's in a working environment, whether it is a significant other situation, whether it's your friends, if you have not set boundaries and allowed the other party to know what they are, or unwilling to stick to your boundaries when they are crossed, how do you expect the other party to respect them if you are unwilling to respect those boundaries? And I think we have a situation with the political climate, the civil unrest that we're having, where people are not respectful of other people's boundaries, or they're unwilling to state their boundaries because when they speak up about these boundaries, they want their boundaries to be acknowledged. They are worried about how other people will view them for setting up boundaries. Well, I have news for you. If you're unwilling to respect your own boundaries, no one else will. So speaking up shows that you're unwilling to, and then they're always going to be crossed. If you are unwilling to speak about your boundaries, and they're always going to be crossed, you will always find yourself in a situation where you are being taken advantage of because you have allowed it. Understanding what your boundaries are, setting those boundaries, and communicating those boundaries, extremely important. I see most of the problems that we're having today in our civil discussion that has seemed to has gone off the rails, a simple matter of people unwilling to respect each other's boundaries and having a conversation about them. If I set up boundaries because I feel a certain way when they are crossed, and then you are going to judge me and then demean me because I spoke up about how I felt, and we're not going to have any compromise on that situation, not good. We need to respect boundaries, and boundaries need to be drawn, and boundaries should be welcomed. You know, that's the weird thing that I see in America right now, where people who draw boundaries are now the enemy, or they're bad people because they've mentioned what things they don't like. And because they don't like certain things, they are intolerant. And we all have boundaries. If you don't have boundaries, your lifestyle can go off the rails. So, for instance, if you are somebody who's a contrarian, or somebody who likes to rebel or buck trends, or likes to go against the grain of culture, and a lot of people do. I'm one of those people. I grew up that way, listening to punk rock music and going skateboarding and going to shows. That was my whole culture. If that was a rebellious culture. But if you have nothing to rebel against, all the fun is out of it. How do you rebel against culture? Well, then you set up boundaries. And then you say you cannot go outside the lines of these boundaries. And then somebody like me steps across the boundary and goes, I'm rebelling. That's what life's about. If you don't have boundaries, if you don't draw up limits, you can't live outside of them. Lindsay Marie joins us, and she says, good point. Thank you, Lindsay. I appreciate that. It is a good point. It is an important point. You know, people bag on conservatism. If people are not conservative, if they don't draw up lines, how could you have any rebellious attitude about conservatism? You have to have boundaries to rebel, to live outside. I am somebody who likes to be a bit of a counterculture, or who likes to have a rebellious spirit, contrarian, ask questions, do a little digging. If everyone is tolerant, if everyone is okay of living outside the boundaries, well, then there are no boundaries and no one can rebel. Come on, let's think about what a healthy, rebellious spirit means to your life. It means finding a better path for yourself than the one that people expect you to choose for yourself. How are you supposed to rebel against your parents if your parents are cool with everything? You know, my parents were very cool with a lot. They were pretty, I would say, well, I wouldn't say liberal, but relaxed about things. I guess you could say they were pretty liberal about certain things, but they were laid back parents, and it made it hard to rebel against them. At some point, I had to just rebel against the other cultural expectations growing up where I did in a very suburban to rural part of Western Pennsylvania in the foothills of Appalachia. And it was a culturally conservative place, but I grew up with laid back parents. So it was hard to rebel against my parents, but it was easier to rebel against the cultural setting of the norm of where I grew up. I think that's what made it easy. Had the culture of where I grew up been as laid back as my parents, it would have been extremely difficult to rebel. And it makes it extremely difficult to rebel. Think about to what extent you would have to go to find pushback. And this is the thing about human beings. We are designed to look for those boundaries because you want to find out where the limits are, what the rules are. Without boundaries, there's no rules. I do better in structure. The more I live in a structured life that I put together for myself, the more I thrive. And that's just as for human beings. a couple things. We thrive within structure because we understand the rules, and it allows us to focus on certain paths that allow us to get ahead. Boundaries also allow us to feel safe. It gives us guidelines so that we can work within those guidelines and step out when we need to, but at least we know they're there. Those guidelines, they act as railings for a roller coaster so it doesn't fly off the tracks. This is important for all of us. And then the fourth point that they bring up is dreams. So intentions, our concerns, what are our boundaries so that we can respect each other's? And then lastly, what is our aspirations? Why are we going to discuss aspirations? Because if we are going to look for a conclusion that both parties can celebrate and have goals in which you are compromising to achieve that allow you to be happy and both parties to be happy, well now you have goals set up. You have something to work towards. Dreams, you should have your dreams. This is the ultimate goal that we're working towards. And then you could have, for those conversations, you could have it's the Mott and Bailey concept, right? I'm going to shoot for the stars, but if I land on the moon, that would be quite all right as well. So there you go. That is the all-in method. And we discussed that on the podcast. We discussed that on the podcast with Alexa and Bob. That is their radical alignment conversation and conflict resolution formula. We dropped it today. We go into great lengths about it, and I hope that you all check it out. It's very, very good. It was a fun episode, and they were wonderful guests. Ditlow says, what up? Well, hello to you, my friend. Let's go through some comments here. Oh, I don't have much today. So that's the episode. Check it out. Also, on a lot of that, here's the last point, and this is the one I forgot. Now that you've set up intentions, concerns, boundaries, and dreams, you have something to shoot for. The last point, and this is now upon setting everything up, you've agreed to disagree on some things and to compromise and agree on others. Lastly, what are the action steps for you to move forward? Because if I have action steps, you have action steps, Animal has action steps. Well, especially if we're transparent in them, there is a trust that has been built that we are going to actualize those dreams or those steps working on those dreams. And if I see you or Animal going and putting in the work for his action steps, imagine how that allows me to feel for my action steps. This is the best part. And with that, of working together and helping each other on those compromises for each one of our dreams, working to get closer to it, I now have more trust built up with Animal, with whoever I am discussing this situation with. And obviously, this sort of discourse is a major part of why we're having so many issues. American Graduate, welcome. How are you doing? JS Berlini, welcome. Thank you for joining us. So, guys, how was your weekend? That's what I'd like to hear about. We have 5 minutes left. I would love to hear what you guys did, how everyone has been. I tend to think, here we are. I was thinking about this the other day. Tony Rehab has joined us. Welcome. The thing I was thinking about is we have been in this situation from roughly the middle of March, and here we are in closing out. Do you believe it? Closing out July. I'm in Los Angeles. We are still on a basic draconian lockdown with good reason. There's a lot of cases. I'm just happy that deaths have not been arising. Our knowledge on treating COVID has steadily gotten better, and I think we're slowly catching up on getting something taken care of here. I have high hopes rolling in the fall. Estefan says yesterday was his birthday to Dirty 30. Estefan, I remember turning 30. In fact, I turned 30 in North Carolina, and I definitely had my hopes, dreams, and misgivings about it. I would say, have you sat down and pondered your first decade as an adult at 30? When I hit 30, I did, and that is how I ended up getting involved in self-development. I needed a much needed break to review my 20s and ask myself if this is the path that I wanted to continue down. And I think a lot of men and women have that thought around 30. Tough Cookies, what a cool name, has joined. Welcome. So have you made it to that point, Estefan? And what did you come up with? I could tell you for myself, mine was 30, and I could tell you the most important thought about turning 30 and how I was going to move forward. The major point that I had come up with, which is why I'm where I am now and why I think the way that I do, was this is the time that I started to think about the ROI, return on investment of my time, and how much my time was worth and what I was exchanging it for. The partying wasn't getting me anywhere closer. I was getting older. The hangovers were getting longer. And that certainly wasn't getting me closer to my goals and dreams. The work that I was doing was iffy. I was bartending and managing a club. That part was fine. But the part of, I was also doing some landscaping and house painting and some just yard work for a few friends. And I didn't like the way that was heading. I felt my time was worth more. So the idea of starting something was coming up, or buying in to the club that I was managing, which was high on my list. But that was the thought change, Estefan. What am I doing with my time? How is it being used? And am I getting the right return on investment? Estefan says, I'm just realizing how much I resist trying to be my dad in my 20s, and now I'm 30 and I got to embrace the old school attitude. Let me tell you something about that very thought, Estefan. I love my dad. He's great. But I think a lot of us start out in our early adulthood setting up ways that we are not going to be our parents. However, I will tell you this, at 46 years old, the DNA is undeniable. It's in you. And as you get older, you start to settle into what your genetics are. When you're young, you have to look at it this way. When you're young, you have all this energy. You are busting out of the DNA. You're you have all this energy and you're setting up, whether you know it or not, you are setting up processes that will allow you to escape from some aspects of your DNA, but not other aspects of your DNA. And there's also epigenetics, where certain switches in your DNA code, in your genes, will be turned on or off, depending on the processes that you set up as you get older and settle into your DNA. For instance, if you are let's just say that your parents are overweight, they're obese, and that propensity to be overweight is in the DNA. It's going to be in the genes that you have. So you have your 20s to set in processes that will allow you to escape that DNA. Those switches will be turned off. However, if you do not do anything about it, those switches will be turned on. So there is some DNA that you're going to be some genes that you'll be able to escape, most not. Most you will live right into. And I see, as I get older, the more I see of my parents within me, but I have been able to escape certain aspects. But that's up to you, and that's up to the processes that you put in place in your 20s and 30s. I am glad that I had spent my 30s looking at the life that I wanted to create and start putting in the processes there. I could have been doing that through my 20s, but I was too stubborn to actually think about those things. But the results of my 20s in doing that ROI look was what the evidence that was given to me was enough for me to start changing those processes. Lindsay Marie says, that's scary, really relaying on those epigenetics. It is scary. However, I will say this, at least for me, the way I feel about it is that I was certainly able to turn off certain parts of those genes that I didn't want to live into, and I am exhibiting the ones that I did want to live into. And I think you have that choice. Granted, there are certain aspects of your DNA that you are victim to, you are imprisoned to those genetics, but you can maximize them. You can work with them, but there is just certain things that you're going to need to escape. But if you understand that there's high blood pressure that runs in your family, you can make those, bring up considerations to stop those processes. You understand what they are. All you have to do is look at both of your parents and understand their habits and processes that have that they have chosen, that put them in the position that they're in, and you can either follow along or outmaneuver some of those ideas. That's on you. That's genetics. It's the game that we all play. But ultimately, the reason that you are here and you get to play this game is because your parents took a chance on you, and you have to appreciate that. For better or for worse, except for Animal. I don't know. Animal, do you have parents? All right, guys, I gotta go. So if you enjoyed our conversation today and you want to learn more about the art of charm or want to be a part of our year-long mentorship program to cultivate your X factor so that you can live into your best aspects, cultivate the right decisions and choices for you, our year-long mentorship group is running right now. It's always running. It meets on Sundays. All you have to do is message me the word X Factor, and I will get you that information. It's rad. It's super. And we've been doing this for quite a long time. Our programs are world renowned. And also, please check out the podcast out this week, Radical Alignment with Bob and Alexandra. I will see you guys tomorrow at 8:30. How about some hearts, guys? Give me some hearts. It is Monday. You all have a wonderful week, and I will see you tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. Kick ass, guys. I'll see you. Bye, Lindsay Marie. Over in Periscope land. There's our hearts. Yes.